This week we are talking about the attribute of purity. If you're reading an older translation of the Bible, or perhaps a more literal translation of the Bible, like New American Standard Bible, for example, you may find the word chastity mentioned in there. And chastity is a very old word, but it is very closely related to purity. And I just thought I would spend a few moments here talking a little bit about purity, chastity, um, before we address the fact how do we, what happens when we do sin and are impure. And before I actually start talking about that, I wanted to talk a little bit about our duty and our responsibility as a Christian to become chaste or pure. So we're going to talk about this on today's edition of Transforming the World. This is the topic of purity. My name is Pastor Greg, and I'll be back in just a moment. Like purity, chastity means the quality of being morally pure. Usually, when you hear the word chaste, you think of an abstention from illicit sexual activities. Priests and nuns in the Catholic Church, well, some priests and nuns, I have to stress that, but some of them take a vow of chastity, promising to abstain from all forms of sexual activity. Chastity also has a lesser known meaning related to personal integrity. And I think that's where I really want to park on that whole subject today, that subject of personal integrity. Let me just share an example with you. Somebody might say that the pastor was a shining example of chastity in every area of his life. What they literally mean is that the pastor was demonstrated a lot of morality. He was pure, demonstrated modesty. And the Bible talks an awful lot about these things, both sexual and otherwise. I know when I start talking about purity, I know so many of us are drawn simply to the sexual side of that, purity or chastity. But Scripture teaches us that purity runs far deeper, and I think this is an important lesson for us to learn. Purity, chastity, if you will. Let's use 1 Timothy 5:2 as an example. There, Paul says that men are to treat older women as mothers and younger women as sisters with all purity, or chastity again, depending on what translation you're reading. And when he used that term to describe women in the church, he set boundaries for purity, pure behavior between the sexes. Meaning, and the meaning here is very, very clear. As Paul is writing this, he says, we are to treat every woman the way you would want someone to treat your mother or your sister. So that's the expression that Paul is writing toward the men. Treat every woman as you would want somebody to treat your mother or your sister. Okay, and that goes far deeper than just through a sexual reference. That's showing dignity and respect, courtesy, generosity, all those things. He also instructed Timothy to take care that his own life was a model of purity, so that he would set an example for the believers, listen to this, in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. 1 Timothy 4:12. So it's not just sexual activity, as he says. We are pure in our speech. We are pure in our conduct. We are pure in our love, pure in our faith. These things are expressions of purity or chastity, depending, again, what Bible translation that you are reading. He applies the same to deacons and elders. He calls them to be models of purity in every area of their life. And it included not just being addicted to alcohol, but remaining faithful to one's wife, staying free from the love of money, maintaining an honorable reputation in all ways. So when we think of purity and chastity, we've got to think far beyond the sexual references, because it goes so much further than that. Granted, the Bible's teaching on sexual purity is very, very clear. Any sexual activity outside of a one-man, one-woman covenant marriage is sin, Hebrews 13:4. But chastity, or purity for that example, is more than abstention from sex. Purity begins in the heart. It's from the heart that all evil comes, says Jesus in Matthew 15. He even taught us that the private sexual lust is impure and sinful. Matthew 5:28. The Bible teaches us that pornography is wrong. The Bible teaches us that immodest clothing is wrong. Even a really passionate, heavy makeout session between dating couples violates the Bible's principles of purity or chastity. People who desire holiness, they must set personal boundaries so that their hearts are not led into temptation. Romans 13:14. So chastity, purity, holiness, these three are closely related to one another. And I think it's important for us to ask this question, and you need to ask yourself this question: have you made these things, holiness, purity, chastity, have you made these things your goal in life? Or do you think that they are simply outdated ideas in today's world? All right, tomorrow we're going to examine the weight of purity in an impure world, what difference that you may make in a world that is running out of control, that is far from holy. Hope you can join me tomorrow. We'll talk about chastity one more time tomorrow. My name is Pastor Greg. Thanks for spending time with me.